Happy Wednesday, everybody. I am Joe Marcello, joined as always by my partners in comic book crime, Orrin Phillips.
Hey, everybody.
And Mike Farah.
Howdy, folks.
We are the Dollar Bin Bandits, and you're listening to the Dollar Bin Bandits podcast. Well, today is a monumental day. It's Wednesday, it's comic book day, and it's the 1st of December. And we are kicking off the holiday season with the Dollar Bin Bandits season of Superman. All month long, we're going to be bringing you our interviews with the talented folks that are the writers, inkers, and pencilers for the Big Blue Boy Scout himself. We'll also be presenting our Superman-themed Bandit bits with a few friends of ours, too. So without further ado, today we are proud to present to you our interview with Karl Kesel. Now, Karl is a group of creators that have become synonymous with Superman. He had a long run on Adventures of Superman from 93 to 99, as well as Superboy from 94 to 2002. And of course, he was involved with the death of Superman.
Yeah, and right now he's really doing some wonderful stuff, Kickstarter projects that's actually been nominated for a Ringo Award. So it's great to see that he's still out there and putting out fantastic stuff.
Yeah, I really love Kesel from our run in the '90s. That you guys and I were very in sync with, and so I know a lot about his work with our upcoming guest Tom Grummett, especially on Superboy and some of the other characters. So really interesting interview, and let's get to it. This is Karl Kesel.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Joe. How are you?
Doing very, very well now that we're talking to you. We ask everyone this as a first question, sort of an origin story, if you will, keeping in line with comics. But what got you into comic books, whether it's as a child or professionally? How did you get started?
Well, I mean, I know I look very young, but I am actually 62 years old. And so when I was, I probably was exposed to them first, those old Marvel animated shows that were on Monday through Friday in the afternoons in the late 60s. Mm-hmm. I imagine that's when I first saw them. I certainly saw Spider-Man and Fantastic Four on Saturday morning cartoons when I was a kid. But it wasn't really until 1969, my family took a cross-country trip. I lived in upstate New York. And we drove from upstate New York all across the southern tier of the United States to Disneyland. Yeah. Which that was the goal of the whole trip as far as I was concerned, and then came back across the northern part of the United States. I believe I was in like Minnesota when the moon landing had happened. Oh, wow. But anyways, it's really boring sitting in a car for a whole month. Really boring. And at the time, gas stations had comics. And we'd pull in to get gas, and my dad would give me a quarter, and I'd go in and I could get like 2 comics at the time for a quarter. And we were gone for a whole month. And of course, gas stations don't turn their comics over really quickly. So in those 2 months, I could get 2 or 3. If I was really lucky, I could get 4 issues of, say, Spider-Man in a row. And I started seeing how everything connected. And I was hooked. I mean, that trip hooked me. Ever since then, I wanted to be a cartoonist.
How did you find your way to DC?
Well, I mean, they gave me work. That's what it came down to. I mean, I moved to New York City after college and dropped samples off at Marvel and DC every single week. I was doing the old light box pencils onto vellum, inked on the vellum, made Xeroxes of those, dropped them off. Marvel responded first. They put me in an issue of Marvel. What was their fan magazine, their fan comic back then? I can't read Marvel.
Wasn't Marvel Age or Fanzine?
It wasn't Marvel Age. I think it was Marvel Age. And okay. Joe Rubenstein critiqued a page I inked over Kerry Gamble of Indiana Jones. Oh. And he said at the time, he goes, Karl's real close. He's got a few things to clean up. He'll probably be working within 6 months. And Joe was right. Within 6 months, I had gotten a gig at DC, who at the time was running a new talent program. And that had involved the New Talent Showcase comic book. And that's where I really got my break. And, from New Talent, I got to work on Tales of the Legion of Superheroes. That was my first monthly gig. By the time I started on that like a few days before I turned 25 years old. And I was really excited that by the time I was 25, I was working full time as a cartoonist.
Now we had spoken to Chuck Patton, who also was part of the new talent thing, and he was telling us, I think you had a similar thing working with Dick Giordano, that he would go out of his way to help people. He was,
Dick was great.
Yeah, very. Could you talk to us a little bit about Dick?
Well, I mean, Dick was a really giving guy and a really great teacher. I also went to the Kubert School. There's a lot of great teachers there too. But I know, I mean, you learn more from your mistakes than from your successes, and I said that certainly was the case, because I remember I actually brought in an issue of Tales of the Legion of Superheroes to Karen, and Karen was not happy with it, and she took me down to Dick's office, and she said, "Dick, talk to Karl about this." And it was like being sent to the principal's office. It was really humiliating. Yeah. And but I never forgot, he was talking to me about putting light areas in front of dark areas and spotting blacks. And a lot of this is stuff that had been covered in the Kubert School, but I had not really taken it to heart. And having Dick talk to me specifically really did. It stuck. It really stuck. I remember what panels he was pointing at when he was talking to me, and there's just a lot of, that's the thing, is when you're in the business, there's a lot of these little tiny moments that really stick with you. I mean, I remember once I was in Dick's office and he showed me a proposal that Michael Fleischer had put together for a new Western character, which never went anywhere. It never got published. And, but this character, there was a certain time bomb aspect to the character, and Dick was going, time bomb aspects are great for characters. It's great to have that in a character. And I still remember that conversation to this day. That ticking time bomb is a great way to build suspense, build drama. And he just said it in passing. This is common knowledge, Karl. But it was not common knowledge to me, and it stuck with me all these years later.
And now you got to start with Amazing Man at issue 1.
Mm-hmm.
How important was it for you as a young artist to start a book from the very beginning, so you're not taking over someone else's work, but this is you going forward?
Yeah, well, Amazing Man was a great comic to be involved with. I knew Steven DeStefano because he was hanging around the offices, and so was I. And unfortunately things have changed, but back then you could hang around the offices. And so I'd known his work. I'd known his work because he did a little, I think it was just one page thing in the New Talent Showcase called Nico Time. And I really liked the cartooniness of it. It was not like anything else that was in comics. And Stephen is a huge fan of the old comic strips, the humor strips in particular, like Barney Google and stuff like that. Very much Barney Google. And I like that stuff too. I lean more towards the adventure strip, but the old strips I'm a huge fan of in general. Mm-hmm. And so we really connected on that level. And then I have no idea why they asked me to ink it, but I'm really glad they did, because I loved Stephen's work. Yeah. And to get a chance to work with him on this was it was just a joy every step of the way. And I have to say, another part of that was really exciting, and maybe Stephen would say this about me, I don't know, but it was really exciting in that short time to see Stephen grow and grow and grow as an artist. I mean, every few issues, something was changing, something was better, something was new. And I was scrambling just to keep up with it.
But you were growing too, as well. I mean, you were seeing, as he was changing, you had to keep up, and you had to keep, changing your style to adapt to his. And I'm sure that must have been a great lesson for you, going forward.
Yeah, no, it certainly was. I mean, thinking on your feet is really important in comics, and as an inker, which I've made, a lot of my career as an inker, my job when I get the pencils is I look at them and my first question is how do I translate these pencil lines into ink and retain what's essential about them without losing it? I mean, I really think the first rule of inking is the first rule of medicine: do no harm. If you hand something in and it's worse than you got it, you really screwed up. Unless there's a huge deadline and everyone's just thankful it got in. But yeah, I mean, I know, whenever I look at pencils, that's what I go, what do I have to do here to really retain what I see here, that the feel that I get here? And that really dictates my approach to the pencils totally. Sometimes it means I pull out my crow quill. Sometimes it means I use a brush. Rarely, but it's happened. I use like Pigma markers and stuff. Ernie Colin on Amethyst, he used Pigma markers. I talked to him about what he used to ink his own work. And so I tried to emulate that.
So you were discussing inking, and you had an opportunity to ink George Perez's work.
Mm.
What is that like for you as an inker? I mean, because he's got some very intricate work, and how does that work for doing that type of job over that type of content, or that type of penciling?
Yeah, well, thank God George is known for his simplicity. That's all I can say.
Right.
But no.
Right.
No, I mean, I would say, stepping into the history of the DC Universe project was very, very intimidating, considering who George was, especially at the time, just coming off Crisis. And I give a lot of credit to the art director of DC at the time, Richard Bruning, because Richard came up to me and he goes, Karl, what you want to do here is, really push things, like on the World War II page, if you want to make it look like Joe Kubert, try to make it look like Joe Kubert. And he really encouraged me to obviously stay true to George's pencils, but to push them in different directions. And that took a lot of pressure off my shoulder. I didn't have to feel like this has got to be exactly line for line what George put down, or I'm going to get fired.
Mm-hmm.
I've been specifically told to push and pull. But because of that, I started to learn techniques like dry brush, like using grease pencil, that up to that point I hadn't used before. And
okay.
These become new arrows in your quiver going forward.
Okay. That's pretty interesting. I don't we've asked people about inking and methods, but not to that granular level of discussing, the medium, grease pencil versus this type of ink and brush and stuff. That's very interesting. Sorry, I just had one kind of art related question. So you mentioned that, you would see work and you say that you hated it. Do people, and out of the people we've just, talked to thus far, no one really says they dislike anyone's particular art. And I'm sure they do, because everyone has their opinions. As an inker and, contributing to the work, to the end result, can you say to anyone, and this is really not, just for my knowledge, if it ever happens, can you say, this doesn't look good? Can you go back and, this is not really portraying the character or the work the way it should be? Does that, or can that even happen?
Are you saying as an inker, can I do that?
As an inker, as an artist, even as a writer?
As an inker, it's really not my job to tell the penciler he didn't do his job. That's really the editor's job.
Okay.
The editor is the one who really, when I get the pencils, I have to assume the editor has okayed whatever I'm getting.
Okay.
So within there, there's always areas for interpretation on my end. I know when I was inking Suicide Squad, this is going to sound really weird, but and it's not like I had photos in front of me,
mm-hmm.
but like one of the characters was the Bronze Tiger. And I was watching the Today Show at the time, and I said, Brian Gumble, he is my model for the Bronze Tiger. And I would just keep his face in my head. And I'm inking Luke's pencils, but, I might model a nose a little more like Brian Gumble's nose. There's another character in Suicide Squad named Nemesis, and
mm-hmm.
he disguised himself. And I thought, it'd be really funny if he was Robert Redford, this really beautiful, handsome guy, but he always disguised himself. So, and like I said, no photo reference. It was just in the back of my head. Yeah, if this goes in some direction, let's push it in a Robert Redford direction. That's the most, as an inker, the sort of influence on the art I would have.
Okay. So
as a writer, there are times I've gotten pages and said, the storytelling here is not very clear. Can we do something to clear it up? I have to say not often, but it's happened.
Speaking of writing, I want to talk a little about Hawk and Dove. Did you approach DC and say, we'd like to take a look at these characters? When they come to you and say, we'd like to maybe reboot them a bit, what do you think? You want to take a swing at it?
No, it was me and my girlfriend / wife at the time, Barbara Randall Kesel. I had been inking the history of the DC universe and came to the big double-page spread about Crisis, and there was a little sidebar with all of the dead characters, and one of them was, of course, Dove. And I agree, Dove was a pretty useless character. I didn't miss him, but I remember thinking at the time, that costume, that name, it should be a girl. It would be so much better if that was a woman. And I mentioned that to like Barbara, and she said, we should do that, and I know it was Barbara who eventually, came in with the idea of the order and chaos characters, and that because we also wanted to take Hawk and Dove away from the political and just make them a little more, I don't know, universal, as opposed to, really focused on a time in American history. And she came up with the order and chaos thing, and then I said, oh, so it's really a story of like Romeo and Juliet, and then from, it was just one thing sparking off of another. Yeah, but we came up with the idea, and I'm not even sure how it ended up in Mike Carlin's hands. He was new to DC. I was working with him because I was inking Superman, but somehow we approached him, and he took it to the higher ups, and it happened. Yeah,
that's pretty awesome. Now, what did you think of the original run of Hawk and Dove? Do you think it was just a period piece that had its time, but that was about it?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think the idea of Hawk and Dove, that they, I love the idea that they say their names and they change, and they have to say it around danger. That's a really interesting little caveat to their powers. They can't just be at the ice cream parlor and say their name and they're going to change.
Oh, look at that dove in the air! Bam! Yeah.
I know, exactly. Unfortunately, though, what if there's like a holdup happening around the corner, and maybe it does happen, But I did like the magical transformation, and I liked like the question of who are these voices and what in the world is going on? What's the bigger picture here? But yeah, I think the original Ditko stuff was really of its time, and we were trying to find a way to make it more, like I said, more universal, more something that had a longer lasting potential.
Did you learn a lot as a writer from that experience to help you down the road?
Yeah. I mean, we worked with some punk called Rob Liefeld at the time, and
that guy.
Yeah, I know. Whatever happened to him? But I was reading at the time. I was reading the EC reprints that Russ Cochran was putting out, the really big, oversized ones, and I was loving those. I was just thinking these were great. But one of the things I noticed was they often did 7-panel pages, and I thought, they look great on EC. So we were like asking Rob to draw 7-panel pages. And Rob is much better with big images, and we were asking him to draw the. I feel very bad for Rob. We learned a lot. Even in that 6 issues. By the end, we were giving him much bigger images to draw, because you should play to your artist's strengths. You should really need to.
Did you pick him, or was he assigned to you?
Barbara again. Barbara, she knew him through a Titan APA, Teen Titan APA that existed at the time. And all I know is I was at San Diego one time, and she like drags him up and she goes, "Look at his stuff. I think he could draw Hawk and Dove." And he did.
It turned out all right.
Yeah, it turned out okay for him.
Yeah, can I jump in? I'm just curious. So that was, I think, probably your first. Was that your first writing gig or co-writing?
Yeah.
So did you really? Was that experience? Did you sort of catch the bug at that point, or did you say, "Well, that was okay. Let me, think about just kind of continuing my inking and art," or were you really like, "Oh, that was a great experience. I want to jump right in where I can jump in again as a writer"?
Well, I'm getting over a cold, so excuse me if I cough. But I'd always wanted to get into the story side. I mean, when I was inking Tales of the Legion of Superheroes and over Terry Shoemaker, and he left after 6 issues, and some punk named Dan Jurgens came in. But
who?
But yeah, exactly. But
don't look at the thing.
I really liked working with Terry a lot, and I heard that Terry loved cars. He actually wanted to draw cars, and not a lot of cars in Legion of Superheroes. And so I wrote up a proposal right away for a series that I would write, he would draw, I would ink, about a kid with a car with superpowers, and it never went anywhere. But that's just to show that even my first year in the business, I was pitching ideas. On Suicide Squad. I would write long letters to John Ostrander going, "Wow, what you're doing is really great. Maybe it means this, and maybe we could bring in this character. Wouldn't it be cool if this happened?" And John was very patient with me. He was very patient with me. And but and also on Superman, I would be talking to John Byrne, and I would throw ideas at him constantly. And once or twice he was very kind and used my ideas. but he said that if I was a Marvel, my nickname would be Karl the Kibitzer Kesel.
There's some old.
So from the beginning, I really wanted to be not just an inker. I had ideas for stories and characters.
So it
So
seems
Hawk
like
and Dove was really kind of the entree. And
Yeah,
you
it
were
was.
that's what you've been waiting to do for a while.
Yeah.
I liked what you did with Hawk and Dove, so much so that they included it in or leaned into that their mythos a bit more when it came to like the Blackest Night and Brightest Day storylines, which I absolutely adore. But and I found the Hawk and Dove part of it really the best part of Brightest Day, in that they were probably the most integral part of that whole storyline. But
I have to say I've not read that, but I've heard very good things.
oh, it's absolutely fantastic.
That's Jeff Johns, right? Jeff Johns.
Yeah.
Jeff is great. There's nothing. Jeff does very few missteps. Jeff knows what he's doing.
What I like about his work as it pertains to really everything he's done is he does his homework. He does.
Yeah.
He pulls out these minute details that have been mentioned previously, maybe 20, 30 years ago, and finds a way to make them significant in current storylines. But we're not here.
And the other thing I love about Jeff's work is he loves the characters. You can tell he loves the characters.
Yes, definitely. So speaking of characters that we love, and the ones that I love, you had the opportunity to write a little character, as you mentioned, called Superman.
Yeah.
Who?
A blip in the history of comics.
He may be big one day. I think he's going to get a couple of movies. How did that arise? I mean, is that something you just kind of fall into, as some people do, or is it you've been blessed with the Superman, go and do your thing?
Well, I mean, I was very lucky. I mean, we've been doing Hawk and Dove, and I did one little Newsboy Legion story for Secret Origins that I wrote and penciled and inked myself. One of the few things I ever did all on my own. And then Carlin liked that, so when Jerry Ordway needed a little help meeting his deadlines on Adventures of Superman, he had me do a number of Newsboy Legion backups, because Jerry was a huge fan of the old Kirby, Jimmy Olsen stuff, as I was. And so it fit all together really well. And based on that, I guess I didn't know it, but I was auditioning to some degree for a bigger job. And when one opened up, Carlin gave me the call. I was looking to do writing, but I actually remember I called up Jerry to make sure it was okay. Yes, he goes, I've done kind of my thing. I'm going to go on my own. And I said, so, I asked him, how's it doing sales wise and stuff like that, and he goes, well, we're doing okay. You're going to get a couple $100 royalty every month. It's not great, but it's, it's better than nothing. Of course, the death had not happened at this point, I mean, they'd been working on it. Obviously, Jerry was leaving after they knew he was dying. Of course, no one knew it would be what it was. No one did. So I stepped in thinking I was just going to take over on the next issue of Adventures of Superman, and when he got better from being dead,
Were you a part of those Superman summits that were, where they would just throw around the idea saying, hey, let's just kill him?
No, I was not involved then. I mean, I was just doing little backups at that point. Not for very long, because even though it helped Jerry with his deadlines, the fans hated that they weren't getting enough Jerry Ordway. And I do not blame them for that at all. I would be angry not to get all my Jerry Ordway. So my first Superman summit was when they were going to bring him back.
Okay. And that's when you were tasked with, or you and Tom came up with Superboy?
Yeah. I mean, that's when out of a myriad number of ideas on the table, we were able to glom onto Superboy. Yeah.
So was there any I'm sorry, Mike, was there any guidance as to the characters that they wanted to bring in? In other words, you propose Superboy. Is there any baggage that comes along with that? Like, okay, there was a Superboy character ages ago. Do we want to fall in line with that same kind of outline, or just let's just flip it completely, and really the only thing that's similar is the S crest?
There was no specific guidance given to us. I mean, I will say going into the summit, because we'd all been told to submit ideas, and I submitted a few different ideas, not knowing really what anyone else was thinking. I had not talked to Jurgens or Wheezy or Roger. I really had no idea what was in their heads. And I one of the ideas I actually suggested, and I'm not saying it happened because I suggested it, but I think it was in the air. I did suggest the 4 titles have 4 different Supermen. But I thought in my little proposal, I thought, well, each of them should reflect the name of the book, right? So I thought, well, Superman, that's going to be the real Superman because it's called Superman. So that's where the real Superman is. Man of Steel, well, there's a history of Superman robots, so it's probably some sort of robot character. And I thought Action Comics, well, Action Comics, that should be the primal, Siegel and Schuster Superman who only, bursting shells, leaps over buildings, that sort of character. And then so I was like, well, I'm writing Adventures of Superman. Who the hell could be in that book? And I hit on that old tagline, The Adventures of Superman, when he was a boy. And I said, oh, Superboy. This is Superboy. So obviously, the stories did not play out that way, but Superboy did manage to find its way into Adventures of Superman. And, second luckiest thing that ever happened to me. First luckiest was Carlin giving me the assignment. Second luckiest, Superboy. Because it could have very easily ended up in Man of Steel, which would have been odd, but Man of Steel, Superboy. But because when we were all throwing ideas on the table, Dennis Janke, the inker on Man of Steel, said Superboy before I had a chance to. And then we were divvying up, and I kind of made a play for Superboy, and I kind of played the Adventures of Superman when he was a boy card. And Wheezy, she said, yeah, you can do Superboy. If she hadn't said that, Superboy would not have ended up in our book.
Wow.
That's interesting.
It's like a sliding doors scenario.
Yeah.
I love that character. I mean, I really do. Not just because it's Superman related, which helps, but very. I think nowadays as a fan, very infrequently do you get to see a new character introduced and follow them throughout their career, because either a character is killed off, their storyline kind of ends and they go away. Plus, there's not a whole lot of new characters introduced. They're either rehashed or rebooted and whatnot. So this character was brought in a hot storyline and has grown and evolved over the years. I mean, they've kind of gone back to a familiar version of him recently, but still, the character grows. And, as a fan who came in during the Death of Superman storyline, which was my, jumping in point to comics.
Wow.
I've followed that character over the years, and, it's cool to see it. Like, I was really bummed when the New 52 happened and he wasn't around.
Yeah.
Because I think they hit its stride with that character right before that whole event happened, and then it just went away. So to see it brought back, I was a big fan. I was excited.
Yeah.
So, glomming on to that comment with a question is sort of like, did you know that Superboy was going to be? I mean, I guess Steel also got his own book eventually, but Superboy was going to be the one that sort of outlived the reign of the Superman and would have this kind of longevity, or is it kind of luck of the draw?
Well, I have no control over the longevity of the character. That's for sure.
Sure.
I mean,
you do by establishing, a really great character and book for a series of runs. I'd argue.
Well, I think there's a lot of great characters out there. Their books get canceled. So, I mean, it was clear Superboy was very popular, and so the word came back very quickly that they wanted to give him his own book. And Tom and I certainly wanted to be involved, and Tom moved from Adventures over to it, and it was great. It was once again luck. It was very lucky that all of those pieces fell in place. They could have gone in a very different direction.
Let's move on to happier pastures, which is staying with the same character, which is the wedding wedding album, I guess,
Yeah.
for Superman. Joe, this is still your bag. Did you have a specific question on this one?
So I I was conflicted with this, not of this question, but of the whole story arc at the time, because I was I don't know, like it just seemed like it was, I don't know, I wasn't a huge fan of it at the time.
Okay.
Only because, not that I wasn't a fan of the work, but I was like, oh man, like, do they really need to have him get married at this point? Because I don't know, I was happy with the whole, not married thing, not because of any fear of commitment, but I think Superman and Lois had a good thing in terms of their the relationship as it pertains to the comic storylines, and I was afraid that it would become a crutch in the comics the same way it did in the Lois and Clark series, because in the series it became all about Lois and Clark loving each other and like nothing matters unless I'm with you and that whole type of thing. I'm like, here we go. However, that being said, I did buy 2 issues of that. So no, I didn't have any one particular question on it. However, that being said, what were your thoughts on that kind of happening in the comics?
I'm good friends with Mark Waid, and Mark hates the idea of Superman and Lois being married. I actually really like the idea of Superman and Lois being married. I think they play off each other really well. I love that Lois, who has no powers, has absolutely no problem keeping up with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
I always tried to write them as Nick and Nora Charles, where they would have little patter back and forth. And yeah, Nick's the famous detective, but I'm not chopped liver, honey, And I think any mature relationship between people should have humor in it and show that they really enjoy being with each other. And I tried to bring that in there. I really enjoyed them as a married couple. I think they are a really great team.
Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely do. And now I think the issue of them being married is really not so much it's like an afterthought, like, oh yeah, they're married, because nothing has really changed, other than the fact that they live together, in story-wise, because they're still the hero and the damsel in distress at times. But I think Lois is a much more badass character nowadays than she has been in a long time.
I've never had a problem with taking a character that has no powers and showing that they are just as capable as someone who has powers. In fact, I think that's a really important message to have in comics, that you don't need these superpowers to do great things.
Yeah.
And I think having Lois there standing right next to Superman as more or less his equal, that's a great message.
Sorry, Mike.
I was just gonna jump yet again, but away from Superman towards a very similar character, which is Harley Quinn.
Her.
I confuse them all the time.
They both have red in their costume. It's just kind of a blur to me. But you had the opportunity to write the beginnings, the ongoing series for Harley Quinn, right? Coming out of her introduction into the comics universe from the animated series. What were the goals of that series? What were you trying to do in this sort of rare case of integrating a character from the outside into first the comic book medium, but also the DC universe? Like, what were you thinking when you were trying to getting that book off the ground?
Well, that was a case of DC approaching me. And once again, it was really a case of being in the right place in the right time, because I was visiting the DC offices. I live in Portland, Oregon. I went out to the East Coast to visit, and Matt Idelson said, "Hey, Karl, come here. We're going to give Harley her own comic. Would you like to write it, maybe?" Well, yeah, I'd love to write Harley, And I will say, at that point, all I had read was Mad Love, which I thought was like the best comic in decades. I thought Mad Love was so perfect, every single panel. And I, to this day, have not seen an animated episode with Harley Quinn in it of anything, to this day. And that isn't because I'm actively avoiding it, but it just never seems to come my way. But I thought Harley was a brilliant character, and I really wanted the chance to write her series when it, but I did have to audition. So I had to come up with a pitch, and I knew we had to get away from the Joker. If she's going to be her own character, she has to be her own character. And I mean, I can't remember all my thinking, but I remember when I sent him the pitch, the first page said Harley Quinn, a love comic about love gone horribly, horribly wrong. And that was my approach through the whole thing is Harley's kind of this weird, twisted Cupid character who gets involved in other people's lives and tries to, hook people up, and horrible things happen because she doesn't really quite do it right. I mean, I really approached it as a love comic.
Yeah. I mean, it makes a whole lot of sense. Especially if you're pushing Joker to the side, so much of her mythos up to that point had to do with her sort of being dependent on this relationship with Joker.
Right.
And then to say, well, you have to fill it with something else. I mean, it's still, there's love afoot, right? So I think that was a cool direction. And I really appreciated how well she was integrated. I'm curious, had you heard from fans early on as to, how you were doing and reflecting what they had been used to on the animated series, since you haven't seen it?
I can't say I remember a lot of fan reaction. I mean, no, I can't. No, I listened to my editors and they liked what was going on. And,
good.
And Terry and I liked what we were doing. So
I think it's a case of if you don't hear anything, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, and I will say, by the way, that when I sent in my proposal for the Harley Quinn series, I contacted, as soon as they talked to me, I called up Terry Dodson, who was doing work at Marvel at the time, because he lives here in Oregon, same as I do. And, I've known Terry for many years. And I said, Terry, would you like to draw Harley Quinn? They want, and, like no one had talked to me about an artist. And Terry goes, I've been drawing her in my sketchbook all the time. And he sent me, and I included his sketches as the artwork in my proposal. And they offered him the job.
That's awesome.
I was going to say that must have helped. Yeah, you guys seem like the perfect team, honestly. He's just tailor-made for that character.
Yeah, he was. He was great. It was great to work with him.
Good. Guys, I don't want to monopolize, but I can continue. So a couple more things that I'm interested in. One, I feel like we're talking about big events, but this was an event, I suppose, but maybe not known as such, but certainly was historical, I think. And that's when you were part of sort of Ben Grimm establishing him as Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So curious about how that sort of came up. I mean, I know there had been probably, speculation, and not necessarily hot speculation. It was just sort of a cool simmer, if you will. And what made you, and I guess Marvel in some way, want to take a stand for this character as being one religion or one characteristic versus another, I'd say, or versus nothing, which is kind of the line usually for most of these mainstream characters.
Yeah, well, obviously, and as we said in the story, Ben is not obviously a strongly practicing Jew. It's never come up in 40 years of comics. So, but I mean, really, it came about because Tom Brevoort had asked me to do a few fill-in issues, and he said very specifically, he goes, I don't want these to feel like fill-in issues. And so I said, well, there's that drawing that Kirby did of Ben in a yarmulke and a little prayer shawl. And why don't we establish Ben's Jewish? And he goes, okay, let's do it. I mean, it really, I don't know if he had to run it up, to the higher ups or anything, but I don't remember any pushback at the time, and certainly not from Tom. Tom thought it was a great idea. And that's how the story came about. And the only, it's weird because, it had to be a self-contained story, and not only self-contained, but there was some guy who had won a contest for Marvel, and he had to be included in the story. So at the beginning of it, there's some guy who's like lost and he runs away from Ben, and that's because that's the guy that won the contest. So I had to squeeze that into the story too. And so I mean, obviously, this is not how you make a life-changing comic. We were just trying to get a comic together that would go out that month. But like the death of Superman, must have been a slow news day or something. It got a lot of attention.
It's so funny how you describe these things, and in that you're talking about the death of a character, introducing a new character, defining a character's religion, and they're just kind of done on the whim. Hey, let's just do this. Okay, sure. Nowadays, the even thought of that has to go through legal, and I'm sure focus groups for X amount of months or what have you before some guy signs off on it who knows nothing about the comic. I think it's hilarious, and I think it's, as a fan, you hear about these stories, I find it fascinating and refreshing that back in the day this would happen that way, and I find it frustrating the way it happens nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously have, at this point, no contact with Marvel and DC. I'm off doing my own thing, which I'm enjoying tremendously. But it does seem that, it's weird to think of, it was 20 years ago, 25 years ago for Death of Superman and stuff, but that doesn't seem like back in the day to me. To me, that seems like a week or two ago, but things have changed very clearly. I mean, I think both Marvel and DC are much more editorially driven than they were at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that comes down to the money that's involved in the movies, and so they don't want to make a misstep. There was I actually wrote, when I was writing the Human Torch series, a series that had a lot of bumps. Believe me, that was not a smooth comic to work on. But I actually wrote a 2-part story, which was about the Human Torch being mistaken as gay, and there was a Fantastic Four movie in development at the time, and even though I wrote, I'm sorry, my phone is going off. I wrote those 2 issues, and Marvel's got those scripts sitting in their vault, but Tom Brevoort gave me a call and said, because of the movie, we can't do this.
That's interesting.
That's strange.
So the movies, that's the tail that wags the dog a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Now, is that sort of what's pushing you to doing your own stuff now, that you have that sort of freedom to whatever ideas you have, what ideas you want out there without a lot of eyes on it and telling you, okay, we have to do this, and this because of movie reasons or toys or something else?
Yeah, I mean, that certainly is a part of it. Certainly. I'll be honest. The other part is I seem to age out of comics. There's a time when people stop calling you, and that was happening to me, and I needed to do work. And so I thought, well, I've got to try this Kickstarter thing, and I'm still doing it. So, but yeah, I mean, there is a great joy in coming up with an idea and running it by. I have some people I trust, my brain trust, and they get to see what I'm working on. Ron Randall is probably my primary go-to guy. He and I run ideas back and forth between each other all the time. And he's a real level-headed guy. And whatever artists I'm working with, Tom Grummett or David Hahn on Impossible Jones, they're also really great sounding boards. So it's not like I know better than them. I mean, I can screw up too. I can not see the forest through the trees sometimes. But if you have the people you trust around you, at least it doesn't have to go through, committees to decide that they can kiss or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How has Kickstarter and those programs sort of changed independent comics in your mind?
Well, they've made independent comics affordable. I mean, up till this point, I mean, the creator of the book, Tom Grummett, and I did Section 0. We started in 2000, but Image was paying us $0 to do it. $0. I mean, Image, there are some cases where they pay people money up front, but Image generally doesn't. And, a lot of the other smaller, independent companies, Oni or IDW or whatever, their page rates are so small. And I cannot pay my bills and do work for them. Right. So Kickstarter came along, and can't say I'm making tons of money, but I'm paying my bills.
Right.
And there's the chance of making more money as I get more people who buy the books and blah, 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 build your base, blah, blah, blah. So I mean, Kickstarter changed that totally. I mean, now there are books that Image is, I know there's one on there now called Lady Mechanica, which looks beautiful and stunning. And Image is going to publish it, but he's kickstarting a special edition in order to pay his creative team.
Wow.
You know, because Image is not paying them any money.
Huh.
So that has changed the field tremendously. So
let's go back to the origin, if it's not too painful, the origins of Section Zero, which was part of, I suppose, you get different descriptions of this, but Guerrilla Comics, which I think, and you can tell me more, was an imprint of Image, or maybe an offshoot of Image. So you finally get to do your own stuff, right? And do it with what you thought was sort of a good financial model, or one that you can sort of live on. So what went right at the very beginning to get you guys all there, and then what quickly went wrong from your point of view at Guerrilla?
Well, I mean, it has been a number of years, and I was not directly involved with this, but I believe Kurt Busick and Mark Wade had been talking to some guy who was going to bankroll us. He was going to bankroll Guerrilla, or at least find backers to bankroll it. And the idea was, of course, we would retain ownership, and they would get cuts of profit and stuff like that. And the idea sounded really great, but and Kurt would know this much better than I do, and he might say I'm misremembering it. But as it turned out, investment people wanted ownership. If they were going to give us money, they wanted ownership, and we didn't want to give ownership. And that's where our problems. We started working on these books assuming we were going to actually get paid a livable page rate as soon as those backers were lined up, and they never got lined up. And then someone like me, I could not afford to keep working on a comic that was not paying me.
Right.
I know Kurt, he muscled through on Shock Rockets and actually put out the one shot Superstar, both with Stuart Immonen. But I know he took out a mortgage on his house to do it.
Wow.
So
yeah, that sounded like a tough period of time for everybody involved. But maybe silver lining is 20 some years later, you and Tom got to finish at least your first storyline, and then continue to publish with these Kickstarter campaigns. How does it feel to come back to something after that amount of time and try to, reinvigorate the whole concept with 2020 or 2019 verve?
Yeah, well, I mean, to Tom and I, the idea was never dead. I mean, we always were looking for ways to revive it and to finish it, at least the first storyline. I mean, we tried to do it as a web comic at one point, just a page a week. If we could just get a page a week up, but that really that's impossible, at least for us. It was impossible to squeeze that in around other paying jobs. Because mainstream comics has it worked out pretty well that, a 20-page comic takes you a whole month to draw, a page a day, 5 days a week, 4 days a month, 4 weeks a month. You don't have time for another page a week for a web comic. At least I don't, and Tom didn't. So we did tried a web comic, failed. Talked to IDW, came very close with IDW to strike a deal. Didn't come together. And then I said, well, there's this Kickstarter thing I've been hearing about. Gail Simone did real well on it not too long ago. And so yeah, we tried the Kickstarter thing, which there's a lot of things I did wrong because I didn't know what I was doing. A lot of things that went right out of my own naivete. I was just damn lucky they went right.
Yeah.
But we got it funded, and then we were able to finish the Section Zero, the first story arc, and that was thrilling. And I have to say, for me and Tom, it didn't feel like much time had gone by. I didn't feel like we had to revamp or revise these characters. I mean, we just kept telling the story. In fact, I think the time away, I think I got to be a better writer. I think it's better now than it would have been if we had done it back in 2000.
Yeah. And what are you, well, I think Oren was about to talk about it, but I wanted to know more about, the current Kickstarter and what you're doing with some of these old/new characters. But Oren, what was the specific question?
I just say Impossible Jones gets a Ringo nomination. Congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, and it seems like it's you're putting out this independent stuff, but folks are loving it, and it's good stuff, and it's getting out there, and the word's spreading. So for you, being such a creative person, how does it feel knowing that doing something on my own and the love is out there for it?
Yeah, no, that's very, very satisfying, reaffirming, and yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky. And Impossible Jones, luckily, Scout is now releasing what was the graphic novel as a 4-issue miniseries. Getting it, you have to realize the first Impossible Jones graphic novel that David Hahn and I did together, only about 1,000 people in the whole world have seen it. So, there's a lot of people going into comic shops, and this is a brand new property to them, and they've never heard of it before. I mean, I have to admit, after years of being immersed in Kickstarter, I will still be talking to, not necessarily people in comics, but I'll be talking to neighbors, and I'll go, yeah, they have about a Kickstarter, and they'll go, what Kickstarter, what? They have no idea what it is. There's a huge percentage of the world that does not know crowdfunding exists, right? But there's a lot of us in there that are getting by on it, and that's great.
That's awesome.
Sorry, I don't unmute.
So I don't know if there's something more I should say on that. I got lost where the track was.
I want to be mindful of your time, but I have to. I wouldn't be doing my homework if I didn't ask you about King Shark.
Oh, yeah.
So Oren has a toy, but
I thought that was King Shark there.
Yep.
It's become a pretty badass character. Now, was that, as I recall, that was introduced in Superboy, correct?
Yes, it was. Superboy number 9. Number 9.
And I
one panel in number 8, I think.
I think I have it within these boxes here. What were your so? What's up with that? I mean, how did you come
How,
to
what, why?
Yeah, all that stuff. I mean, because it has become a fantastic character in the Flash series, and obviously now in Suicide Squad. But in the comics alone, it has become a much more prominent character.
Yeah, well, I mean, you never know what's going to happen. You just never know what's going to happen. I never would have thought when I introduced King Shark that at this point he would be, really my biggest, at least one of my biggest cultural contributions, if you want to call it that. I mean, and let's face it. I mean, what King Shark is today and how he was introduced, there's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of differences too. Like you were saying, Joe, characters evolve.
Right.
And I think a lot of who King Shark is today, you can give a lot of credit to Gail Simone for. She certainly, I think, gave him a certain personality that I didn't give him necessarily. And obviously the movie has just supercharged him. And I have to say, I'm thrilled by all of it. Not, it's like watching your kid grow up and be successful, and I guess I would say doing it right too. It's not like I wince when I see him. There's people who say, "Oh, but they made King Shark like into a fool on the screen," and I'm going, I enjoy watching him. I don't feel like he's a fool,
I remember seeing him on Flash and texting Oren, like, "Dude, King Shark is on the show." He's like, "What?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, DC doesn't let me know about all of these things. I have never seen that toy until just now, Oren.
This is part of the Imagine X line. So these are my children's.
Oh, it moves.
Yeah, his face bites in his little metal helmet, so it makes him look like a hammerhead too, that they give him as well. So my kids think this is the coolest thing ever. So I was like,
I love it.
He came up with it.
Your kids, right?
Yeah.
Right. That's why I got this stuff. My kids.
Kids.
Yeah, for the kids.
Right. Yeah, sure.
Now, did you do him as sort of a villain of the week sort of character, or did you think he was someone that could, possibly pop up down the road a little bit too?
Well, he's a character that even in Superboy, I did have him pop up later on.
Right.
But I mean, when we first introduced him, he's really just a serial killer. I mean, he killed people, he ate people. I mean, he was a very nasty customer that Superboy had to deal with, I mean, really, that was, he was a shark. As Gail Simone says, King Shark is a shark.
Yeah.
He does shark things.
He does shark things, and you shouldn't be surprised when he does shark things.
That's his name.
But I mean, I'm very lucky once again that DC decided to run with King Shark. I think luckily the name sounds cool, so because DC has another shark character. There's an old Green Lantern villain called the Shark, but he's too cerebral. King Shark's very shark-like, very very visceral, very primal, and I think that's part of the appeal of it.
Right. Definitely.
Plus, he's royalty.
He is royalty. I mean, demigod, I guess, son of a shark god.
So, it's good to be king.
Shark.
It is good to be king, But I mean, if he wasn't called King Shark, Kurt Busiek would have never used him in the Aquaman story, where he was doing like the Three Kings. There's just a lot of luck that happens there, and pieces start falling in place, and things happen like this. Like all of a sudden, he's in the Suicide Squad movie. Right. Yeah. And voiced by Sylvester Stallone,
There you go.
Is that the voice you heard in your head? Did you hear his voice when you were creating that character?
I can't say. Most likely no. But in the movie, it's perfect. In the movie, it works.
Oh yeah, it totally works. I'm glad to hear you, talk a little bit about luck, because I mean, I feel like sometimes that goes without being stated, how much of our lives and success sometimes is due to being in the right place at the right time and just something happening. But you gave us a template, King Shark, and that's sort of a couple of appearances. That's all we need. That's a great palette for other people to pick up and paint with, sort of.
Yeah, you never know. You just never know what's going to happen.
So, sorry, go ahead, Mike. Good.
Go ahead, Joe.
No, I was just gonna start to wrap up, but if you had something else, I mean,
because I was also going to start to wrap up. No, I was going to. Okay, thank you. Well, I was going to ask you, Karl, for folks that are interested in your work, what is going on now? What may be coming down the line very shortly that we can help draw some more eyeballs to?
Well, most importantly right now is I'm doing a lot of work with the character Impossible Jones that David and I co-created. And if people don't know about her, she's a thief. She gets superpowers, and is mistaken for a superhero and decides to roll with it. But has no intention of giving up her criminal ways. She's because now the police will tell her like what they're doing, and she can go into the jewelry store and say, so what sort of security system do you have here? And they're happy to tell her because she's a superhero. And so we're having a lot of fun with Impossible Jones right now. If you go to your comic shop, you can get Impossible Jones #1 from Scout Comics. And if you go online, we are kickstarting the next new Impossible Jones story at impossiblekickstarter.com. And that is actually a team-up book with a character I created in 2nd grade called Captain Lightning. So she teams up with Captain Lightning in a story which guest stars Section Zero from the book that Tom Grummett and I did. So
all coming together.
It all comes together. Yeah.
Cool, man.
Hey, welcome back. That was our interview with Karl Kesel. He had such a great career. Being able to work on so many beloved characters over the years is just an absolute treat to talk to him about. And of course, being able to work on Superman. Who doesn't love that?
And I also learned for years I've been calling him the wrong name, saying Karl Kesel. It is Karl Kesel. And thankfully we learned that before the interview, or else I really made a fool of myself.
Yeah, all my jokes about doing the Kesel run and, put a pot with the Kesel, they just didn't go over. And we want to apologize for those, even though they never made it to air. Karl Kesel, you will forever be Karl Kesel. Anyway, folks, that's it for the first episode of our Superman season of Superman month. We were excited to bring it to you. We have Tom Grummett coming on, Karl Kesel's very frequent collaborator. We're looking forward to that. So let's just get into it. You know, you can hit us up on Facebook, on Instagram. We are Dollar Bin Bandits. We are on Twitter at DB Bandits. Hey, we got an email. Can you believe it? A kind fanatic named George Nevis sent us a very nice email. Very encouraging. Thank you very much, George. Please send us some more email. We love to hear it. We may read it. We may read your name. Just, give us an old holler at dollarbinbandits@gmail.com. So that's it for this week. As I said, let's go out on some great Superman music, which we probably can't play because we would be sued into eternity. And we'll see you next time.